Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today to learn about specifically MTM and how you can put together a competitive application to our program. So this information session is going to be completely focused on that, and we hope that you get a lot of great information on how to present yourself in the best manner possible. Also, feel free to use the chat function to ask questions. Joy or I will be monitoring that depending on who's speaking and who's watching, who's in the chat function. So first of all, a lot of you are familiar faces, so nice to see you again from our previous sessions. But an intro for those of you who may not. I'm Verna Rodriguez. I'm the Executive Director here for the MTM program. I come from 30 to 40 years of industry experience, specifically in medical devices, large companies like Boston Scientific that you might have heard of, Abbott Vascular, and also startups. And I've been teaching for the last 4, going on 5 years, and I've just been the executive director of this program for a little over a year now. And Joy, I'll let you say a few words about your background.
So welcome everyone. My name is Joy. I'm the program manager of the MTM program. And I come with over 15 years higher education experience. So working with all different populations from undergrad, graduate, international students. So that's where I'm from. I'm excited to be part of this program. Been with MTM for also a little over a year.
So we are the dynamic duo running this program. Okay, so the MTM program is, if all of you have said it unless before, we provide engineers, clinicians, and scientists with the engineering, business, and biomedical training necessary to take a new medical innovation from initial idea into clinical use. So this presentation is not specifically about MTM, but this is one slide that's an overview. Basically, what really makes us special in terms of our program, even I was talking to students last night, and they're just saying how they love this first semester is really bringing it all together because they're taking all of the coursework they're doing and they're constantly applying it to their real world capstone project. So that means business, clinical, regulatory aspects. And if you want to learn more, you can all, of course, go to our website at uctranslationalmedicine.org. So, but no matter what program you're applying to, we share a lot of common elements across programs. So that will be really helpful for you. Even if you're looking at different programs, a lot of this will be very similar for across the graduate division at UC Berkeley and UCSF. So what makes a graduate school application stand out? I've read a lot of applications, so has Joy. And what we're going to do is basically kind of go into what makes things stand out as we've read through applications over the last several years. Let's see. Okay. So your application is basically the story of you. Okay, so what you want to do is give us a glimpse into who you are, what brought you to where you are in terms of looking at a graduate school program, but also, last but not least, where you want to go. So if we're reading an application and it doesn't seem like it links up with what the intent of our program is, which is basically to teach you about translational medicine, about devices, about therapeutics, and have some connection to industry in some manner, then we're going to be wondering why you're applying to our program and, why do you think it's a good fit? It's going to be confusing to us, and so you won't get ranked as high. And you'll see that when I'll do a brief pointer to the rubric that we use. So let's get into what application materials look like. There are multiple elements on the application that you're required to put in, and you'll see that when you go onto the website. It's important to know that you'll be submitting through the UC Berkeley application portal. Okay, so although our program is UCSF and UC Berkeley, the application goes uniquely into the UC Berkeley portal. Going through the order of these, there's a background statement. You'll have an academic history section, grades, with GPA, of course, recommendation letters, or usually a resume or a CV or something that shows employment history, as well as maybe any academic research positions. For some of you, your statement of purpose, as well as your personal history, and then supporting materials. And those are different depending on where you come from and what's required. Not all of these are equally weighted, but we have a rubric, which we have posted for the last almost a year now, and that tells you exactly how we rate your application. So our intention is to be very transparent, and also to help you so you know what to focus on in terms of writing your personal history and your statement of purpose, but also for your as you guide perhaps your recommendation letters from managers or PIs, things like that. You can also tell them some of the elements of the rubric that would be important for them to mention. So what's key in terms of looking inside of these admissions areas, one of the things that I wanted to just point out at the very top here, because a lot of people email and ask us, you do not need to have any GRE scores or any other scores from any of like MCAT, whatever. That none of that is going to be part of the rubric. You can submit them as supporting materials, but literally probably not too many of the readers will even go in to dig into it because it is not part of the rubric. They might glance at it for some reason, but it's really not going to be, it'd be very unusual that it would have any weight at all in terms of, someone reviewing your application. So what you want to do is balance these elements against one another to try to assess what we do is in order to assess your fit for the program. So basically, how do these elements tie together is what we'll be asking. What are you highlighting in your essays, in your letter? What are your strengths and weaknesses? What are some of the challenges that you've overcome in your life? We look for just a variety of different students from different backgrounds, and your unique story is what makes you someone that we get excited about in terms of coming into our program. The supporting materials, I say kind of like, why is there a dotted line here? Well, it's because these supporting materials are basically not part of the rubric, but they may be things like your TOEFL. It might be a variety of materials that are unique to your situation that you want to make sure are there to add to your admissions. Okay, so there's two areas where you basically exercise the most control over your information and creativity, and that's your statement of purpose and your personal history. What's important to sort of think about is that your personal history, an easy way to think about it is that that's kind of like basically who you are from the from the past up to where you are now. And then your statement of purpose is more of a forward-looking statement, what you plan to do with the degree and what you plan to do and why you want to come into the program after you graduate from MTM. So it's important to spend time and go into more depth in terms of these components. Again, things are not set in stone in terms of what you have to put into it. But again, the rubric that we use is on our admissions tab on our MTM website. And it clearly states, I think it's the second paragraph under the admissions place, it says, and the rubric we follow is here. So because it's too hard to like put the whole thing here, I just did a visual here of some of these categories, but let me put the link into the chat. Oh, hold it. Or maybe Joy, can you do that? Can you get the link to the chat to that?
I already did.
Okay, oh, good, thank you. So, so this is just a few snapshots of what it is, but basically it's a very straightforward scoring process of 1, 3, and 5. And readers will also, put in like a 2 or a 4 if we think it's between any of these categories. But we go through these like 6 or so different categories, starting with academic performance, with grades and things like that, going into your fit with translational medicine in terms of your work experience thus far and your passion about it, etc. The last one being letters of recommendation. So when you go down to that rubric, have it in front of you when you're writing your statement of purpose and your personal history statement, because you want to make sure that you include elements. So for instance, let's go into the essays. Again, these are the 2 different chapters of your story. Like I said, the difference between the statement of purpose and the personal history statement are, one is more historical, looking back, and the other one's looking forward into the future. So we want to learn about what brought you here to this point, specifically what challenges or barriers you overcame. Talk about your strengths and your weaknesses, okay? It's in the rubric if you don't mention it at all. Because our rubric is public and stated there, then you'll be downgraded if you don't really talk about both of those things. Also, what sparked your interest in this field of study? And then looking forward with your statement of purpose, why our particular program is of interest to you. If you've been sitting in on these sessions, if you've gone through our website at uctranslationalmedicine.org, then it shows that you have basically done some thought and considered the different elements of our program that are a good fit for you. And let us know, of course, what you hope to gain from the program and how your career goals line up with basically translational medicine. Okay. So it's important to differentiate the content between your personal history statement and statement of purpose. Don't just, be stating the same things in one as the other. Okay. That you have, a certain amount of verbiage that each reader is going to be reading through. And it's good to spend a lot of time to basically write something out and then summarize and pare it down. Each one should be about 1 to 2 pages long. So that's also a good guideline, because readers have to read through dozens of these applications. And we read through, we have 3 readers that read through your application and score them. So it's not just one reader, and it's a mix of faculty as well as staff like myself. So let's see. Yeah, we read them both. We read them. So we read them both back to back. And we suggest that you also proofread them in that way. Ask, a friend, a colleague, to also look at them in this way. So even with that, even from back to back, they also need to stand on their own alone. Okay. So look at them from all of those contexts and perspectives. So another question that we often get is on essays is, can you use the same essay for multiple programs? The key here is that it depends. Okay. So the same essay could be used if it sounds, if it's basically a very similar program, okay? But if it sounds like you really want to go to med school, it can hurt you in terms of applying to our program, because we're just going to be looking at, okay, it looks like you're just trying to get into another program as a backup. And are you really that interested in translational medicine? So make sure that even for the programs that are very different from MTM, that you don't just cut and paste an essay into our application. But we do realize that it's important to a lot of students to have multiple pathway options, okay? How long should the essays be? As I mentioned, they should be 1 to 2 pages each. Okay, if you only write one paragraph, it's not going to be a very interesting story, and it would be very unusual that you'd be able to cover all of the aspects in the rubric. So again, tell us a story, make it personal. How should you address bad grades? Which is a very good question and often asked, is that what we want you to do is, and recommend, is for you to briefly address them in your personal history statement. Showcase your success in other areas, okay? So don't be dissuaded if you have lower grades, because as you'll be able to see from the rubric, it's only one aspect of how we score you. And if you're low in that area, you can really showcase yourself in the other areas. Think back to that fit diagram. So, you know, because we're a professional program, obviously we need students to have a certain level of academic success, so we feel like they're going to be able to succeed here at UC Berkeley and UCSF. But there's sometimes a lot of folks who, you know, they turn in their grades from a bachelor's. Maybe that was several years ago. That's not unusual for a lot of our students. And maybe they were really a different person at that time, and they've had a lot of work success that's directly related to translational medicine. And letters of recommendation and work experience, all of those can take years to improve upon yourself, and you can make it show in your application. So tips for writing essays. First of all, make sure that you are clear and concise in your paragraphs, and make sure that you're organized. Get to the punchline early, because a lot of times students will start with a story and it's going along, and then we really don't get to the punchline until the very last sentence. And it's like, okay, so finally we get here. So, you know, just make it such that it's a compelling story, and we really, you know, get to drawn in to your statement. Narrate, okay? So style can definitely set you apart, okay? And you want to avoid just resume dumps. I also wanted, though, to throw in something about ChatGPT and AI. What our program does specifically is that if you make it through the first pass in terms of the rubric, our program specifically interviews every single candidate that we think is going to be admitted. And that goes into, it's not listed on the rubric, but you will be scored and it'll be weighted in addition to the rubric. So if it becomes pretty obvious that your narration, any of your statements of purpose, don't really align with a voice that we hear in the interview, it's going to be very awkward in the interview. And we have definitely had students who scored high and then did not make it through the interview process. Obviously, there wasn't ChatGPT at last year's round, but it kind of goes back to, if someone else is writing it for you, it's not going to go well when you get to the interview process. So, so make sure that you do write from your own voice and that it's authentic. Okay, so the submission of any false or misleading information of any kind in the support of an application for grad division at UC Berkeley can result in the permanent cancellation or rescission of admission. Okay, this would come from the vice provost. So please make sure that you understand that, and that you spend your own personal time developing a good voice on your documents. Okay, so write 2 different chapters. Okay, like I said, each essay should tell a different part of your story. Again, looking back, what your history has been, and then of course, looking forward in terms of your statement of purpose. And if I didn't say it enough, edit, edit, edit. The best way is to write. Don't worry about how long it is. It's usually better to spend the time first just putting it all on paper. Maybe it's 2, 3 pages, maybe it's even 4, but then summarize and pare down and really get it crafted. And that's where the time should be spent, is basically just summarizing and making this compelling story. And like I said, ask others to read it too. Okay, now I'm going to hand it off to Joy.
All right, let's talk about letters of recommendation, right? So your letters are really a chance for someone else to tell your story, right? The more they know about you, the more that they're able to support other aspects of your application. So you should curate these choices, highlight different facets of yourself. And you can play an active role in this. Don't just ask for a letter. You can send them your personal statement and your statement of purpose to your potential letter writer so they can get to know you more, especially if this recommender doesn't know you as well, right? So the more you know about someone, the more you can talk to their strengths. So let's look at some of the traditional letter archetypes, right? So one is, I attended this class and I got good grades in this class. Another one that we see is, if you are in a research lab and you develop new lab workflows, right? Which one of these sounds better? Well, to us, the one on the right does, right? Because a lot of people in the program got good grades in classes. But what does that tell us about you other than you got an A on the class? Does that tell us anything other than what is on your transcript? No. So we really want to know about you, right? So if, like I said, dig deep into this and don't fall for the I got a good grade in a class and I went to office hours and studied hard. So did everyone else that's applying, right? So how do you differentiate yourself with your letters of recommendation? So that's why we say you play an active role. Don't just ask for a letter. Send them your application materials so you can get a letter that speaks to your authenticity and who you are as a person, not something that we could see on a transcript. Okay. So here's some FAQs on letters. Who should you ask for a letter? So people you've worked closely with, supervisors, PIs, definitely not friends or family. They're biased. So committees tend to prefer an academic recommender. So I know that we have people in the program that have been out of school for a really long time, and some that are, just graduating. So it tends to be a little bit more challenging for those who haven't been in academia for a while. So for those people, we do understand that most of your letters are not going to be from your undergrad degree. But for those of you that are applying straight out of undergrad, you need to have at least one academic recommender. So another question we get is, can I submit a letter on their behalf? So the way that the UC Berkeley application portal works is that you enter this person's information, their name and their email address, and they get sent a link to upload the letter. So no, you can't do it on their behalf. So this means you might need to take a little bit more time. And don't do this last minute. Don't ask someone last minute, right? Because it's going to take them time to curate a letter on your behalf and upload it to the system. That's one thing you don't really want to be stressed about when the application deadline looms. So the more time you give yourself, the better. So you should be, if you haven't asked now, right? We still have like just over a month to go. Make sure to get on that. Next FAQ is, should I waive my right to see the letters? So on the application, you can waive your right or you can not waive your right, right? But we do recommend that you waive your right, because when reviewers look at it, they say, oh, I wonder why they didn't waive their right. Did they want it? Just, we've had professors say, that are skeptical of letters that haven't been waived. Let's just say that. So that's our personal recommendation on that, is to waive that. Right. And then should it be on letterhead? Yes. So if it's from a company letterhead, if it's from a professor on whatever university's letterhead, it makes it look more credible and official, right? If it's on letterhead than just a blank Word document. So let's talk about tips on how to request letters. So as I just mentioned, request early, give them ample time to write a thoughtful letter for you. Help them help you. So remind them, especially if it's been a little while, of your unique contributions and skills. Remember to tell them which program you're applying to and why, and the deadline. I think it's particularly important that if you are asking a bunch of, the same recommender for letters for different programs that you're applying to specifically, that the letter is a little bit more generic and saying, I fully support them in their pursuit of graduate education, because I cannot tell you the amount of times we see like, I really like this student and I recommend and fully support their application to UCLA. Like, that's great. We're not UCLA, right? So make sure that if you are applying to different types of programs, that little portion there, when they fully recommend you to support you for graduate education, that's a small little tip. And the next thing is waive your access. So let's dig into a little bit more about your resume, right? So your resume is just part of your story. Make sure it's an easily skimmable document to capture various aspects of your background and experience, right? So just think as if you were applying to any other job. The person reading this part, reading your resume, they're only going to spend like a minute or two, right? So you want to make sure that it's easily skimmable and that the experiences that align with the program specifically stand out. And definitely no more than 2 pages. I don't care how much work history you have. So for international students, please make sure to check the Berkeley International Office website for details. But these requirements of the TOEFL or your IELTS, that those are required if you studied in a country where English is not the official language. And some countries where it is too. That's why we say, please go visit the graduate division website that is set up on there, all the requirements, those detailed requirements. So, but if you did at least 1 year of coursework at a US institution with Bs or better, then it's not required. So something to consider of your personal situation. If you have questions at the end about you specifically, just send us an email and we can guide you. And then if your GPA is not on a 4.0 scale, that is fine, right? All countries and universities are not equal, and they have different grading scales. So this is more talking about WES, so WES certification. You do not need WES certification for applying, but depending on your home country, you may need it after admitted, especially if we need to have your transcript translated into English and it's not on a 4.0 scale. So not needed for application, but may be needed after the fact. So here's some of our top tips, right? Start early, ask for help, and then focus on the parts you can control, right? Those essays and letters that can set you apart. Your transcripts, what you've done in the past, that, your resume, that's a little bit more set in stone. Like that's just what you've done. But your essays and letters can really set you apart. So remember to tailor your materials to the specific program that you're applying to and know and communicate your why. So that kind of ties all the pieces together is whether you're going to be a good fit for the program you're applying to. So we want to talk a little bit about application fee waiver as we continually get questions about this. So on the graduate division website, fee waivers are available to US citizens that meet certain criteria. So it depends on what programs or background that you have. So make sure to check out the graduate website if you have questions about application fee waivers. The MTM program specifically does not provide fee waivers. So we only, if you can get your fee waiver approved through graduate division as a whole, that is fine, but the program does not waive application fees itself. So that's something that's unique to us. If you want to get a student perspective, right? So I just want to highlight that we have office hours with our student ambassadors. So here's a snapshot of who they are, and you can book one-on-one 30-minute appointments with them and just ask them about their experience in the program. And here's who they are and their backgrounds. And there's a QR that takes you to the page on our website where you can book with them. We also have a few upcoming sessions. So we have one virtual office hours with myself in a few weeks in December, and then one in early January before the deadline. So if you have any questions, if you register, it'll send you the link to the Zoom meeting. And in these sessions, I'll just be speaking with individuals one-on-one, answering their individual questions about their application. So with that, I wanted to open it up to Q&A for anyone to ask those questions that are, let's see.
Yeah.
Hole.
Looks like I've got one in the Q&A part. Looks like we probably have maybe both in Q&A and chat. So in the Q&A, we've got a question. How would you like study abroad credits to be handled?
So when you speak of study abroad credits, you would submit if you have depending on how your university worked, right? I get this. I studied abroad as well when I was an undergrad. Usually those credits are reflected on your undergraduate transcript. So it's part of that transcript. If you were given a separate transcript from the university where you studied abroad, just submit that as well with your application so that we can see those.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see, Peihing Zhang asks, are there any specific requirements, such as courses, for the new therapeutics track? And how is this track different from the previous MedTech focus, one that's regarding curriculum and projects? I'll go ahead and answer that one because I'm really excited about it. I was just meeting with our faculty director at UCSF about that, and he's the one who's working on this quite a bit with me. So there are no specific other, new different requirements for the new therapeutics track. As we get folks that are admitted, we'll be looking and asking probably in a survey of if there's interest in the therapeutics track versus the med tech. So that's how we'll sort students out. And that's where it will help us decide on how many capstones we need in therapeutics versus capstones in device. And the track is different from the medtech focus in terms of curriculum and projects. So the projects, we will have, drug or biologics type focus projects. And so that will be on the therapeutic side. And then For the curriculum, we have just been going through to see, all right, where do we really want to divide students to where the coursework will be a little bit different. Well, regulatory, for instance, is one area where the regulatory pathways and the lectures that we have are different between devices and drugs in terms of the regulatory pathways, what departments you're working with in the FDA, as well as around the world. So the regulatory module, which is like 3 lectures, I think, that will definitely be divided. So students, we usually have somewhere between 30 and 40 students, would be divided where we'd have 2 different lecture halls that you go to. Our plan is pretty much for the, if we look at it on the quarter system, which is on the UCSF side, where we'll be doing most of the dividing out. The first quarter, we plan to have all the students together. The second quarter is where we plan to have things divided out. And like I said, regulatory is the one area that we feel needs to be different. I believe that intellectual property is where we'll be having lectures again split out. So basically all the different areas that we teach, we're looking for where do we see things that are pretty much the same, that we don't need to split people out, and we'll put those into the first quarter. And then where we see, oh, we need to really split out lectures so that we've got device versus therapeutics, we'll basically like split the class. Yeah, so I think that answers the question. Then our plan is to have the last quarter students would come back together again, because we'll be focusing pretty much on pitch deck, business strategies, things like that. And a lot of those can be taught together in one class. I know on my side, I teach the project management, which starts with needs finding and all that from the biodesign book text by Paul Yock. And I'll have the class together the first semester. The second semester, I teach design control for medical devices, which just like the title is specific for medical devices. So I'll be looking for other guest lecturers to teach basically more of the therapeutics and biologics specific types of processes that are different from medical devices, because design control is not a requirement for therapeutics. Okay, great. Any other questions? You can feel free to raise your hand. Queen, can you tell us your question?
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. I was wondering, I was looking at the curriculum, the elective courses are not more than the core courses. So, and there was no cap on the number of elective courses that one can take. I saw lots of courses I found exciting, the pharmacogenetics and stem cells, but there was really no cap. So what exactly influences the number of elective courses a person should take? That's my first question. Then my second question, I was looking at the Capstone project, and I'm a physician. I'm particularly interested in the cardiovascular system. So I saw about 2 projects on the cardiovascular system, and the one on atrial arrhythmia, I was looking at the MTM contribution, and it was more on markets, helping the product scale. Okay, maybe I've not gone through all the Capstone project, but are there places where students in MTN are not just involved in helping the product scale, but are also involved in development of the technology? Thank you very much.
Sure, thanks, Queen. I'll answer your last question, then I'll turn it over to Joy to answer about the electives. In terms of the capstones, so yeah, we typically every year have capstones on cardiovascular. That's one of the biggest areas of healthcare need. So there's lots of companies, startups, and big companies, and faculty and physicians that are working on devices or therapeutics for the heart. In terms of what your work would be, every project has a small or large design aspect. And a lot of times the projects, in terms of the major work of focus, is very much driven by the students. So if there are not many engineers on a project, like if there's only one, and the engineer is going to do, I mean, every team is going to have a little bit of design work, but if there's a lot more interest, then that might be the major focus. So you get paired up with capstones based on you voting after capstone potential sponsors have pitched to our student class. You get to vote on it. So if you see, oh, this one's got, the capstone sponsor really wants us to have some focus on design, and that's their most important thing, then that might be a project that you'd be more interested in. So it really is depending on the sponsor and the students in terms of the weighting of how much work is done on one aspect of business versus design versus regulatory. And I'll turn it over to Joy to have her answer about number of electives. That's often the big kerfluffle in the first semester. Like, there's too many, how many classes should I take? I don't want to miss out. So go ahead, Joy.
Yeah, so in terms of electives, I'm sure you've seen on our website, there's a bunch listed. So within each category, whether that's the science and engineering, clinical, or business, there's a few required classes, and then you fill up the rest of the units with electives. So you will be taking electives in each category, but outside of what is required for the degree, we still have students that want to take more, right? They're interested in this and that. But we just want to let you know what is required for the program is a full-time load. So you will be spending, like 40 hours a week just on everything that is required for the degree. So if there is more interest, we do have students take additional classes. We do recommend usually no more than 1 or 2 extra classes on top of degree requirements, just because it is a lot of work. And especially our program in the beginning, since we start at UC Berkeley in August, right, on the semester system. So you're just doing things at UC Berkeley and you feel like, oh, I have so much time. But once you start classes at UCSF at the end of September, when the quarter system starts, things tend to ramp up. So where students think they have capacity, the capacity quickly disappears when the UCSF classes start. So that's where we hesitate to have students take too much. And we usually try, if you can handle like 1 or 2, that's great. We just really would like students to manage their workload and not get spread too thin where it ends up hurting them academically. But as being a graduate student, the drop deadlines are a lot more lenient. So we work with you and we'll talk with you, and you can try something and then we just check back in and make sure, is this still going okay or not, right? And pivot at that point. So I hope that answers that a little bit.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is that students sometimes, even though we try to emphasize it, so we'll emphasize it here again, is, and you'll be hearing it more, is that your capstone is going to be taking many hours a week of your time for you to really get something out of the program. This is where and I can't emphasize enough, it's real world. So not only are you going to be applying and doing projects or assignments that are applied to your capstone, but your capstone sponsor has work that they want you to get done. Okay, so you need to balance that with your coursework. And a lot of the coursework that we have you apply to your capstone is just the starting point, okay? And it's plenty of work. Addition to that, again, real world. It's not unusual for these capstone projects for you to discover something to where, oh, there's a problem, something's not working. This is real world. It's like a startup. You need to figure out, okay, what is the problem? And it's not like a senior project. You need to be able to go back like you're leading the project and determine what possible solutions or pivots would be. This is where it's fast fail, okay? It's real world. You need to learn how to say, oh, this isn't working. You need to collaborate with your sponsor and your team to decide how you're going to move the project forward. It's challenging, but you're going to find that it is your best learning environment for all the wonderful parts of it and all the parts that you think are just not what you expected. That is the real world part of a capstone project. Okay, it's collaboration. It's having problems that are thrown in front of you that you didn't expect, maybe even that the sponsor didn't expect in terms of perhaps vendors. These are all the things that you're going to get in addition to just the coursework and the things that you think are very straightforward and linear. They will not necessarily be that way. And it's a lot of great learning you can get out of it. Other questions that came up is Oliver asks, let me scroll up here. Can I elaborate on the capstone project selection process? Yes, for capstone projects, once we have admitted students, I know the approximate size of the class. So if I've got, say, 30 or 40 students, let's say I've got like 34, like I have this year, I already know that the capstone project team size is best at either 3 or 4 students. So I try to make every team 4 students, but obviously it depends on how big the class is. And so there's usually always a couple of teams with 3. Once I know the number of capstone projects, because I know the class size, that was in this case, this year it's 9, I then start soliciting for capstone sponsors in the new year. Okay, so in that March timeframe, I try to get 1.5 to 2 times as many sponsors as I need, because in that way, the sponsors will then prepare and they will pitch to you, the students, in August during that boot camp period of time. You will then listen through Zoom while you're in boot camp, but it'll be in the either midday Zoom meetings or in the afternoon, early evening. You'll listen to these boot camp, to these Zoom presentations during those boot camp weeks, and then you'll vote on your favorite capstone projects. I can't guarantee that you'll get your first choice, but out of the ones that you listen to, I require students to listen to 10. So like, for instance, this year we had, I think, 19 possible capstone projects. You get to pick the 10 that you want to listen to in this first 2 weeks. And then you vote on your top, I think it's 5 or 6. And then I will place you, I place students in as many of the top choices as possible. And that's how the teams are formed. I make sure that the mix is balanced between engineers, clinicians, and life science folks. And I look for some of the things that the sponsor's been asking for. Oh, they really want at least one engineer with electrical engineering background, or they want someone with prototyping experience, or they want someone, they'd love to have a clinician who's got pharmacy background, whatever. So I try to match those up as well. And that's how the teams get formed. Does that answer everything for you, Oliver? Hope so. All right. In terms of Kenny asks, can I talk about the interview process? Yes. What happens is once we decide that we've got these students that we are thinking would be good to admit, we divide up the students with interviewers, and our interviewers are a mix of faculty, staff, and alumni. We have each of the interviewers have at least their resume in front of them. And we also give a few questions out to ask, and typically it's going to be around all the different areas that are on the rubric. Because a lot of times what the interview process does, we believe it's a great two-way for not only for us to interview you and find out anything that might be confusing, or like sometimes with readers, for instance, maybe there's an area where one reader said, well, I'm scoring them this way because I read their application thus. And then the other reader might say, well, I interpret it this way. So we try to get clarification where there might be differences in scoring, or just anything confusing on the application. And then the other part of the interview is basically for us to sell the program to you. And so it's basically those two ways. Things where things have gone bad in interviews is don't come to the interview, don't be late. Don't just not show up. I mean, we've literally had people with great applications who completely fail because they miss or are late to 2 different scheduled interviews where we try to schedule you, or they have a great application, but it seems like someone else wrote it, because when you ask basic questions like, oh, why did you want to come to the MTM program? They don't have an answer. I mean, literally, we've had someone last year say, oh, I couldn't get in as an undergrad, so I wanted to see if I could get in a master's program. That was the extent of their answer. Okay, so you might have a great application, but if you can't talk to the program, you're not going to get in. This is a collaborative type of professional program. We're looking for teamwork. We're looking for clear communication, excitement, maturity, and professionalism. But even with that said, if you don't get in this first round for some reason, people do apply, 2 or 3 years later, because then they have some professional background, they have a little bit more maturity, and we don't downgrade you for that. I mean, you have a whole fresh application, and so yeah, so don't think all is lost, okay? But it's good to know what to be expecting in an interview process.
Great, thank you.
Sure. Oliver asks, regarding electives, is it generally more recommended to spend extra capacity on the capstone projects than the electives? I would say yes. Would you agree with that, Joy?
Yes.
Yeah. A lot of people it's just not unusual. I can tell you the good and the bad of Berkeley and UCSF. So it's a scale. It's like you come here, it's like, okay, great. I'm in this wonderful space that's the hub of medtech biotech. You look at all these courses, and it's usually just like a kid in the candy shop. Like, which one can I take all of them? I've only got 10 months. And so there is often a tendency to overload and want to take too many classes. So some students do fine with that. Okay, some students they're just great at powering through classes. Maybe some classes they already have a great bioengineering background, and so they're loading up on some technical ones, which would be unusual, but they're doing fine. But most students, again, like what Joy said, is like 1 or 2 electives per the semester or quarter is appropriate. And even in the very beginning, as you're just getting assigned capstones and you're getting to know, there is time for you to start digging into the disease state, the anatomy of your project. And I highly recommend that. A lot of students, it takes them too long to get going on it. And you have this extra time in the beginning to really dig into the disease state, competitive products that are out there. In this way, you're going to, when you get further into the project, you're going to be respected by the physicians and clinicians and other people that you're interacting with. If you don't know some of the basic terminology of the disease state, of the capstone that you're working on, and competitive products out there, then people aren't going to want to spend too much time talking with you when you're looking to do interviews and find out. So give yourself time to do that. Let's see. I'm looking for, okay, Kenny, good. Oliver, good. Let's see. Do you see anything else in Q&A, Joy, or are we? Nope, I don't see anything here. All right. Any other questions? People want to raise their hand? How are we doing on time? We are just 1 minute.
Yeah.
Okay. So since we're getting up on the hour, I am going to go to our last slide, but not least. Again, start your application if you haven't today. You don't have to fill it all out at the same time, but it gives you a good idea of, oh yeah, I've got to get this going and that going. So our applications are due on January 8th at just before 9 o'clock Pacific time. Again, email us anytime. mtm@berkeley.edu goes to both Joy and I. And we're happy to step you through the process. Just to reemphasize, those letters of recommendation take time. And if you haven't done so already, make sure that that's one of the first things you do is go and get people to start writing your letters of recommendation. Viola has a question, please. And I'll just let people know if you need to drop off, please. But if you want to hang on to ask specific questions, Joy and I will hang on for the next few minutes. So let's let Viola ask her question.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt.
No worries.
I actually left my question in the meeting chat previously.
Okay.
Yeah, but I can repeat my question.
Yes.
That I'd like to know if working experience in software engineering will be beneficial for applying this program. Thank you.
So if it is software engineering directly related to translational medicine, such as software as a medical device or software that is somehow supporting a product in medicine, absolutely. If it's not, at least it's technical. So obviously we look at things in terms of closely related to translational medicine as a first priority. But after that, it's like, okay, we've had people have EMT experience. So it's a little bit, obviously, it's not really like translational medicine, but it is in the medical area. But I would categorize computer science as also a positive, because a lot of, or even more and more medical devices like to have, our capstone sponsors like to have people with coding and computer science background. So it's a big plus in that specific aspect.
All right, got it. Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Sure. Okay, we'll let people drop off. And like I said, I'll stop sharing.